Good morning. Thank you for coming here today. We are here to talk about a very serious problem and a solution to that very serious problem. It's across Nassau County and the entire state, zombie properties. But I wanted to take a minute before we start to deal with another issue that has come up that I've gotten a lot of questions about. You may have seen in the news this morning that Governor Cuomo has responded to the call that I and many labor leaders, community activists, and public officials across the state have raised, and the governor is convening a wage board, directing the labor commissioner to convene a board that can consider and investigate the adequacy of the wages for workers in our fast food sector. This is a critical issue all across New York. Men and women are working full-time jobs and living below the poverty line. The government is actually subsidizing companies with food stamps and other programs because they pay so little that people who work full-time are in poverty. No one should be in that situation. I wrote a column on April 16th noting that the wage board was a way around gridlock in the legislature, and I'm very, very pleased that the governor today is calling on the labor commissioner to investigate the adequacy of the wages of fast food workers. It is a great breakthrough. The best option always, of course, is legislation, but this is something that the governor can and should do on his own, and I'm pleased that he's doing it today. But whether the legislature votes to increase the minimum wage or the wage board acts, it is very important to have a real living wage for all low-wage workers, not just fast food, but all workers across our state. Communities across the country, from San Francisco to Chicago to Seattle, have already increased their minimum wages to as much as $15. Sadly, in New York, our state's minimum wage remains at $8.75, due to go up at the end of the year currently to $9. I'm hopeful that with the wage board being convened by the governor, it will go up further than that. My office has been engaged in, and we continue to respond to the call of low-wage workers who are being cheated out of overtime, not having their wages paid. We've recovered well over $20 million for over 17,000 low-wage workers, and we are urging workers to come forward. If you're being abused, if you're not getting a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, the Office of the New York State Attorney General is ready to hear your complaints. So a good day for the working men and women of the state of New York, with the governor announcing this today. And with that, let me thank my colleagues in government for joining me as we move to the topic of zombies in Nassau County. And our great county executive is here. I'm pleased to be joined by Ed Mangano. We're also joined by Nassau County Minority Leader Kavan Abrams, my friend Assemblymember Chuck Levine, Assemblyman Todd Kaminsky, Hempstead Town Supervisor Kate Murray, and Michael Reed. Yes. The director of the Firefighters Association of the state of New York, and firefighters have a particular role in protecting communities and a particular concern about the topic of the day. I am overwhelmed with the turnout by other public officials here, and the county executive is going to acknowledge some others when he comes up to speak. I have to say that my office has been involved in an ongoing effort to hold accountable big financial institutions that caused the crash of the housing market in 2008, and wherever we can, to direct the resources that we get, the penalties that they pay, to the communities that were hurt by the crash. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've already committed significant resources and gotten the banks to help out a lot with people in Nassau County, but the problem here is as acute as it is anywhere in the state. When I took office, there were 345,000 New York families facing foreclosure. It was a crisis statewide, and we have moved as quickly as we can to deal with it, but there is more work to be done, and the zombie foreclosure bill we are here today to support is the critical next step. I'm very proud of the fact that my office, alone among attorneys general, was the first to stand up and demand accountability and demand funds for communities hurt by the crash. And I'm proud of the fact that as a result of that advocacy, the President of the United States appointed me to co-chair a national working group to pursue this topic, to investigate, and to see that the funds got back to the communities that were hurt. We have recovered nationally through my working group, over $60 billion in penalties and direct relief for families that were hurt. That's $60 billion. And I have used my position as co-chair to see that the needs of New Yorkers are taken into account when these deals are being negotiated. We've used a portion of those funds to create the Homeowner Protection Program, or HOP. We have some HOP grantees here today. This is a statewide network of legal services and housing counseling agencies that are helping New Yorkers. Since it was created a few years ago, they've already seen over 40,000 New York families. People are getting their mortgages written down, their rates reduced, people are staying in their homes who otherwise would have been foreclosed on. My commitment to you is that no one in New York will ever lose their home because they couldn't get to a lawyer, and we're making good on that commitment through the HOP network. Organizations like Long Island Housing Partnership, Nassau Suffolk Law Service Committee, the Nassau County Bar Association, among others, are working with us through the HOP network. Now, it's important for people to understand that you may be eligible for relief that you don't know you're eligible for. So please don't hesitate to reach out to a housing counselor, and the elected officials here are in touch with the network and can put you in touch with a lawyer or a housing counselor if you need one. But we're essentially here today because after we went through this and set up the Housing Counseling and Legal Services Network, we discovered that we were still missing a big part of the problem. And the problem was this: even if you kept your home or were able to save your home after the crash of the housing market, if you are on a street with abandoned properties, you are also a victim of the crash. Abandoned properties bring down the value of real estate in the whole neighborhood. They are havens for crime, vulnerable to arson, and we have set up what are called land banks to help people help communities buy up abandoned properties, but we realized that wasn't doing us any good with a particular category of properties that we are here to address today, and that is what are called zombie properties, neither owned and by anyone in particular, but not owned by anyone identifiable. They are truly in a zombie state. These are properties where the homeowner has abandoned the property, but the bank or whoever holds the mortgage has not completed the foreclosure process. So the bank doesn't own them, so they don't maintain them. They fall into disrepair, become vulnerable to crime and vandalism. They weigh heavily on local governments, which usually take on the burden of maintaining them, and they're a big burden for code enforcement for our police and firefighters. I'm particularly pleased that the firefighters are represented here with us today. Long Island has been hit as hard as any place in the state. It has really been the area most affected by this phenomenon. The highest total number of zombie foreclosures in the state was here on Long Island in 2014. Now, we have had some success with individual towns trying to come up with strategies to deal with zombies, but we're here today to support legislation that would solve this problem statewide once and for all. We introduced a bill last year, late in the session, called the Abandoned Property and Neighborhood Relief Act. Simply, this legislation forces banks and other lenders to take responsibility for maintaining zombie properties and helps local governments also to deal with this in several ways. The bill has been reintroduced, and we have picked up tremendous support in both the Senate and the Assembly, and I think, as you can see by the crowd here today, this is a truly bipartisan issue. This is not something where people are breaking along party lines and or even regional lines. Everywhere in this great state of New York, local governments are suffering with the burden of zombie properties. So the new version of the bill that's been introduced and is moving through the houses of the legislature would first require banks to provide homeowners with notice that they're legally entitled to stay in their homes. A lot of people figure that as soon as they stop making payments, they have to leave. In fact, they don't have to leave until a foreclosure is complete, and that gives time to work out negotiations with the bank if it is possible. As I said before, there are many homeowners eligible for relief that they don't even know about. Second, and most critically, the bill would require the banks to maintain the properties once they're abandoned and not wait till the end of the foreclosure process. We believe that this is going to also provide an incentive for banks to move the foreclosure process forward more quickly, and that's something that we want to help them do. Third, the bill will create a statewide registry for zombie properties that will be maintained by my office, the Office of the Attorney General. It's going to be available to all of the local governments in the state, And this is a huge resource for local governments that often are going through all sorts of difficult maneuvers and tactics to try and determine who owns a property. That now will be transparent. Banks that fail to register zombie properties or fail to maintain them will be charged a fine. And the new version of the Abandoned Property Neighborhood Relief Act actually directs that money from fines paid by the banks will go into a fund to be used to help local governments pay for the code enforcement and other things that they have to do to maintain these properties. It's very important that we recognize the burden put on local governments. Sometimes in the state government, we're good at imposing requirements. We're not so good at passing along resources. This bill seeks to remedy that problem, and we certainly are doing everything we can do in negotiations with the banks and through this legislation to get resources to our local governments. The final provision of the bill is to expedite the foreclosure process. It is something that the banks should be in favor of. We believe they are. We're trying to negotiate exactly how that would work. But once a property is abandoned, it's in everyone's interest to clarify home ownership and get it back on the market as soon as possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, this legislation is a no-brainer. I don't think zombies have brains, so maybe it's appropriately titled. It really has been designed with the help of a lot of experts in this area and the input of a lot of my colleagues in government to deal comprehensively with this issue. We want to pass this common sense bill and beat back the growing plague of zombie properties in this year's legislative session to put an end to the burden placed on cities and towns by zombie properties and having to maintain all of them, and putting an end to the burden placed on law enforcement and first responders, firefighters, by the danger posed by zombie properties. Let's do that this year. And now I'd like to introduce Nassau County Executive Ed Mangano, who has produced today and has joining us today really the most diverse and bipartisan group of folks I've seen at any press conference on this subject. I commend you for your good work, and I'm extremely grateful to the men and women who represent communities and represent Nassau County for their commitment and their energy on this. There's no place in the state that needs this more, and there's no place in the state that is pushing more aggressively for this. Mr. County Executive.
Thank you, Attorney General. Thank you very much. It's certainly an honor to join with the Attorney General. We have worked very closely together on a number of areas that have benefited the citizens of Nassau County, from working to try to establish a land bank to cracking down on Medicaid fraud. The Attorney General has stood with Nassau County time and time again. I want to publicly thank you for your leadership. And today he attacks a problem we have all, collectively as elected officials here, in much a bipartisan fashion, have been trying to attack locally. Let me introduce some of the elected officials that are with us, and again, if I miss you, please send up your name. But of course, we have with us Supervisor Kate Murray, and this is in no particular order, Legislator Judy Jacobs, Legislator Sheila Bino, Councilwoman from the town of Hempstead, Dorothy Guzby, Town of North Hempstead Councilwoman Anna Kaplan. I guess we'll hold the applause to the end, okay? We have a long list here. Mayor Bruce Kennedy, Mayor Wayne Hall, Trustees of the Village of Hempstead, Louis Figueroa is here, Legislator Ellen Birnbaum, Village of Kensington, Darren Kaplan is here, Town of Oyster Bay Councilwoman Rebecca Alicia is here, and Legislator Denise Ford. And as the Attorney General said, this bipartisan showing of support for the Attorney General's bill is warranted and welcomed here in Nassau County, and we stand behind you and your bill, which will make a profound difference on the quality of life that we enjoy here in our great counties. Zombie homes have been an issue. We here on Long Island have the highest number of zombie homes in the state, and that is why this bill is all that more important to the people of Nassau County. These zombie homes create blight. They are meccas for troubles in the community, from squatters to graffiti to vandalism. An abandoned house plagues the neighborhood reduces home values, and creates a public hazard. And that is why we are here today to support Eric Schneiderman's bill. And I do want to mention here in the county we have worked locally to make a difference. I want to recognize Assemblyman Todd Kaminsky and Legislator Ford, and especially Todd, who worked very closely to create a registry here locally that is up and running. And we are working with the towns, such as Town Supervisor Kate Murray, to expand our registry here so we identify the homes and can make an impact locally. But really, globally, the solution here is found in the Attorney General's legislation that we support wholeheartedly. And again, with that, we urge our colleagues in state government to support the Abandoned Property Neighborhood Relief Act as introduced by the Attorney General. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we're going to hear from another strong ally in this effort, Nassau County Minority Leader Devon Abrams.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here to join the county executive and obviously our attorney general, who has shown great leadership. Abandoned homes, zombie homes as we know them, has been around in our county for quite some time, and leading the effort to make sure that we remove this blight from our communities. We want to commend and thank the attorney general for his effort, and hope that this process through the state legislature with the leadership of Assemblyman Levine as well as Todd Kaminsky could be done. We all know the blight and the heaviness that it puts on every single Nassau County taxpayer. And to be honest, zombies, goblins, and ghouls don't pay taxes. So we got to make sure that we can get these properties on the rolls of responsible individuals that want to make a solid contribution to our community. Whether you live in Uniondale or Merrick, Manhasset, Freeport, Hicksville, it doesn't matter, Plainview, zombies homes are everywhere throughout our county. They don't discriminate. They're in all levels, all income level communities. And the best way that we can ensure it is by getting these properties back onto the tax rolls. But in the meantime, making sure that the banks take responsibility at an earlier time than ever before. And that's what this will do. What it will also do, which I'm proud to say, is that it won't push people that are currently going through foreclosure or hard times out of their homes. The best way to prevent zombie homes from becoming zombie homes is to have somebody that's in them, so they don't fall to prey to homes that be drug abuse, or they don't fall to prey to animals or anything along those lines. That's the best way, is keeping people in the home. They shouldn't be pushed out. And then as the owner transfer happens, we get the home to the bank and then eventually back to homeowners. And I want to again thank the Attorney General for his leadership. Without him, we wouldn't be here, and obviously addressing this very significant need in our county. Thank you again, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you very much. Thank you. He actually spilled the beans on our new Goblin and Ghoul Tax Recoupment Act that is going to be introduced later in the session. And now someone who is really one of the most eloquent people in the state legislature, a good friend I've worked with on many, many issues, a strong supporter of this cause, Assemblymember Charles Levine.
Thanks, Attorney General, for the kind words. You and I have stood together and fought for the major human rights achievements that we have accomplished in New York State over the years. And when you were in the Senate, we were partners on so many pieces of great legislation, especially dealing with justice issues. And this issue is an issue of justice, as is very much the issue of the minimum wage increase that is so devastatingly needed in New York State. But these pieces of legislation that the Attorney General and I and many of our colleagues have worked on all have a common theme. And the common theme is community. How do we enhance community? How do we make community stronger? How do we protect members of our community, especially those who are, in weaker positions or more vulnerable positions? Because we know that at the end of the day, community is all about everyone. It's about those who have power, those who don't have power. But if we don't protect those who don't have power, then we are condemned to make matters much, much worse. This will make our communities stronger. The interests, the banks and the mortgage companies, and this is certainly not to demonize them by any means, made a great deal of money during the days in which mortgages were far too easy to attain. And they want these properties back. Now the question is, if you live in a home and the home next to you is abandoned, that hurts you. And when it hurts you, it hurts community. So I'm very proud to be here today. I am sure that this has tremendous support in the New York State Assembly, and I look forward to the day that it becomes law in the state of New York. And finally, to our great Attorney General, there's another achievement that you had this week that's outstanding, that should be mentioned. Arrests were made in New York City, gangs that are importing, and it's very lucrative for them to do this, guns from some of our sister states in which guns are far too easy to get. Those are the guns that come back to New York to haunt each and every one of us. That's a matter of protecting community as well. Eric, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and it's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Assemblyman Levine. And now, as someone who has not been in the legislature long, but has already had a big impact, and someone I'm looking forward to working very closely with on this and other issues as we move ahead, Assemblyman Todd Kaminsky.
My district on the South Shore of Long Island is really ground zero for the zombie property problem. Both the financial crisis and Hurricane Sandy really took its toll from one end of the district to the other. And the most frustrating thing about it is there's very little that can be done. Fingers are pointing at each other in different directions, and there's very little responsibility, and that's why I was so pleased to work with the county executive on coming up with a local solution. But a comprehensive solution was required, and someone to step up and provide the leadership that's necessary to make a major change in this area was required, and thank God we had General Schneiderman to step up and do that. I'm very pleased to be able to push forward for this legislation, which I think will go far toward correcting the problem. I look forward to fighting for it, and I'm glad that we could all come together to do this. When I go through my district, there are Democrats, there are Republicans, there are old, there are young, there are black, there are white, who are all plagued by this. And the really hard thing is that you could do everything right. You could take care of your home, pay your taxes, be a law-abiding citizen, but next door are mold, rats, squatters. You know, you see the value of your home go down and the quality of your life go down. And something needs to be done about that. I'm glad we now have a plan. Thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman, for your leadership, and I look forward to fighting for this in the State Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Assemblyman. And now someone who has truly been on the front line and a great colleague in government, Hempstead Town Supervisor Kate Murray.
Well, thank you, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, for leading the way on this very, very important issue. And I urge all of my former New York State colleagues up in the Assembly and the Senate to pass this legislation as soon as is practicable. And from a local perspective, you know, recently Newsday charted the course of a home from the time that it was reported by neighbors as being abandoned to when it was finally demolished. It took that local municipality over a 7-year period to get it finally demolished, and it cost the local municipality $25,000. Now, during this period, the local municipality, like the town of Hempstead and the other towns that are confronting this on Long Island, they had to deal with squatters, overgrown grass, contacting the mortgage lender to no avail, property maintenance, boarding up the building, and then ultimately demolition. Our township can certainly relate. Just last year, the town of Hempstead board secured or boarded up 466 buildings and ultimately demolished 6 properties. And while this cost the town property owners more than $300,000, it is a necessary expense, as has been said before, to maintain the values of all of our homes and the quality of life in our communities. So the town of Hempstead has been combating these zombie properties, but as has been said, we need not only a regional approach, but a global approach as well. And so we are very, very delighted by Attorney General Schneiderman's advocacy of this piece of legislation. The legislation that is proposed sets clear rules for the first time on which entity will be responsible for property maintenance during the foreclosure process. The town fully supports the Attorney General's proposal to make banks or mortgage lenders responsible for those properties during the pendency of that legal process. We are also very much in favor of establishing a registry of zombie properties so that our local municipalities can track where the trouble spots are greatest. So our residents work hard. They work so hard on Long Island to pay their mortgages, to pay their taxes, and they also take time to maintain the pristine nature of their own properties. It's simply unfair for them to have to live in the same neighborhood as a zombie property and have to ultimately foot the bill for that cleanup, maintenance, and demolition. Once again, thank you to General Eric Schneiderman for bringing our fight to the state level, and I urge all of our state legislators to get behind this legislation as soon as possible. Thank you, General.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Supervisor. And now, finally, and I'm really especially pleased that he could join us today, because to anyone in Albany who still has any doubts about what we're fighting for with this legislation, we're fighting to make people safer. We're fighting to make our communities stronger and safer. And now, to speak to the issue of zombie properties and the need to pass this bill, Michael Reed, the Director of the Firefighters Association of New York State.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and I'd like to thank all of our elected officials for allowing the firefighters to join with them today, and thank them for supporting and supporting our safety as we go out and do our jobs. We've heard today about the many and varied problems that the abandoned and neglected properties pose to our communities. It's sad to realize that in a post-Sandy economy, Long Island leads New York State in a number of these homes, and that on a national level, Long Island is among the top 10 regions across the United States in zombie homes. These homes pose a quality of life issue to all of our residents. They also pose a very real problem to our firefighters. When there is a fire, our firefighters respond with no questions asked. We have to go in, we have to search these homes, we have to look for residents and squatters that may be inside. Imagine being a firefighter and going into one of these homes that has been decimated by people going in and stealing the copper wiring and the plumbing out of that house, leaving holes and having that firefighter fall into that burning basement. We've already lost one volunteer firefighter this year, and we hope to lose no more. We'd like to thank again all of our elected officials for supporting us. We'd like to thank the Attorney General's office for a wonderful job. The firefighters across New York State are united in their support of all legislation that supports our building codes, improves code enforcement, and makes the job of protecting our communities a safer one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And Eric, if you tell them who you are and...
We're complete.
Okay, thank you.
That was perfect.